Gondola sitta.
Mr. Frodo's not going anywhere without me.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if you've not been here before. My name's Gareth and this is Book Songs and Love and Magic, and I'm going to talk about some book stuff. And basically, what I thought would be really nice to do, I've never done this before, and have I seen anyone do this? I think I've seen someone do this, but anyway, after the last book I've read, it kind of inspired me to do my top 10 favourite characters in any book. And my approach to this was definitely about the characters. So I didn't want to focus on a particular genre of books. And as it happens, even though I wasn't planning to do this, I just went with what my favourite characters were. I just looked through the books I'd read and picked out particular characters that really meant something to me or really moved me. And I whittled it down to 10. And actually, it goes across quite a lot of different genres. So you've got horror, fantasy, science fiction, crime, literary fiction, westerns. Yeah, and I'm going to do some honourable mentions as well, because there is one character that I don't think I could really talk about too much because I've only read 2 books in the series, but I feel like it'll become a favourite character. So I thought I'd mention it as an honourable mention, and I was going to mention another character as an honourable mention because it's not really the character so much, although, well, I guess it might be number 11 because it kind of is the character, but when I get to it, I'll try and explain why I'm using it as an honourable mention. But anyway, so quite a lot of different types of books here, and quite a lot of different kinds of writing, really, and different parts of my history of reading as well. So I am actually going to start with the first character that I fell in love with as far as got me into reading past the novelisation thing. So it goes right back to when I was a teenager. And I'm actually going to reread the books soon. There's all of this stuff I'm going to reread because I do think actually what I'm doing here, because characters and character development, character arcs, character dialogue, character relationships, the way characters move the plot and sit in the plot, all these different things make that aspect of novel reading the most important part of that for me. I did a video on this a little while ago, and I'll try and stick that at the end of this video. If you're interested in seeing it, it's all about me saying that characterization is the key to great storytelling, and I do think it's true because you go through the plot through the character's eyes, and even if it's if it's a first person book, then clearly you're going through the point of view of the character. But if it's a third person book, you still the story is still hinged on how much you're invested in the characters, I think. So these are examples of great storytelling, even though I think they're very different books. And the first one I'm going to use is kind of fluffy, pulpy stuff. So it's got to be said. And there are some much deeper stuff in this group of books. But I'll explain why I'm using this first one when I start. So yeah, let me know what you think of this selection, my 10 favourite characters. And I'm going to start with my early reading period. And I've got, what is this? I've got 5 books of the series here. And it's the Stainless Steel Rat. So, he first appeared, it's so funny because even the book covers really have got such sentimental value for me, because it was these sphere science fiction books that I read first. So I would have been about I don't know, probably about 13 or something when I read these. So a teenager, a kid, and I absolutely loved them. And it was just sort of sending me off into this other place that was beyond what I was watching on TV and watching in films. It was me getting a chance to kind of see this sort of thing unfold in science fiction literature. and I thought he's a really interesting guy. And as it develops, obviously he meets Angelina, and then they get married, and then by the time, and then he goes, he's got a time travel story, Stainless Steel Rat Saves the World. By the time you get to the fourth one, Stainless Steel Rat what Stainless Steel Rat wants you, the two kids are heavily into the story, and they this was probably the funniest one, I think, but they're involved in the story as well, and they're on this adventure with their parents, Angelina and Jim the Grizz. And in the fifth one, I'll never forget the fact that for me as a teenager to read this in one day was a big deal. I was literally wandering around a house with my head buried in it. I couldn't put it down, and Stainless Steel Rat President is kind of the last one of those books before he left. Harry Harrison left a bit of a gap, and then after that he wrote Stainless Steel Rat is Born, and then he wrote a couple of others. Stainless Steel Rat Goes to Hell and Stainless Steel Rat Gets Drafted, I think it's the other one. He wrote those later, but these were the first 5 that came out, and he's like a cocky thief who ends up working for the that version of like a special, I think they call it a special corps. It's like a police organization, and it's funny. It's just a great thing. But I haven't read these for a long time. But I did read the Stainless Steel Rat Goes to Hell and Stainless Steel Rat Gets Drafted not that long ago, so probably about 6 years ago or something, 5 or 6 years ago, and really enjoyed them. So I thought, well, I'll probably still enjoy these. They're a little bit more of their time, but I don't think they're that dated. And I was quite pleased when I saw a couple of science fiction booktubers recently mention these, and they read them because they heard about them, and they enjoyed them. So it kind of makes me think, well, maybe they're not that dated or whatever. But yeah, Stainless Steel Rat has got a massive part of my history of reading, and I've got a lot of affection for this character. So that's the first one that I'm talking about. I was 7 minutes in, I've only mentioned the first one. I need to move on. So, the next one I'm going to mention is a character that you'll definitely know, part of a trilogy, very famous trilogy. This is a character in The Lord of the Rings, and I'm choosing The Return of the King. It's a bit of a grubby copy. It's my copy, though. It's my copy. The Return of the King. I'm going to use this as the example as I'm holding up because two kind of major parts of the character arc for this character happen in this book. And I'm talking about Samwise Gamgee. So Sam is fundamental to the story. He's fundamental to Frodo's journey. He's actually fundamental to the entire plot being resolved. And he's like the best version of a best friend in any story. This is obviously a lot deeper than the Stainless Steel Rat books. There's a lot of world building in it. There's, he invented the Elvish language, and there's lots of songs in it. There's all sorts of elements, there's sorts of layers to these books that make them great. But the characters are great, and Sam is such a lovely character, and the way that he devotes himself to his best friend Frodo, because he knows the enormity of the mission they're doing. And in this book in particular, you've got the confrontation with Shelob, the massive spider, and you've got the ending. There's loads of endings to be fair in this book, but you've got the kind of the climax of the story on Mount Doom with the ring, and the fact that they're both exhausted. They've both gone through this horrible journey, and there's not much left in them, and they make that last push, and Sam kind of gets that last push. Sam is the reason why they managed to do it, because Frodo's had enough by then, and he's kind of given up. He can't hack it anymore, and Sam pushes on, and it's just such a beautiful friendship, and such a really good character that's been written by J.R. Tolkien in this fantastic story. So Sam is my choice for the second one I was going to mention. The next one I was going to mention is an author that I do think is fantastic at characters. I think the best thing about this guy's writing is the way he deals with characters. And out of all of his characters, for me, this is the most vivid, fascinating, creepy, brilliantly realised and compelling characters. So I'm talking about Needful Things. I'm talking about Stephen King. And if you like Stephen King, it's the characters that you like, really, I think. I mean, obviously the stories are great and the subjects he chooses to tackle are interesting and all that. And people love the meditation on grief, if you like, that Pet Sematary is, and the creepiness of The Shining and Salem's Lot, obviously. But it is a lot about characters of Stephen King. And I think if you don't like Stephen King, it's because you either think he overdoes the characterization or that you just don't connect to the characters. But I do think that's his strength. And Needful Things is one of my favourite Stephen King books. And Leyland Gaunt is the villain in this book. And Leyland Gaunt is such an interesting villain to build the story around. So, you know, he turns up in this town. He starts opening this shop, Needful Things, and he basically, through this sort of slow progress of the plot, he manipulates the entire town through this mysterious ability he's got to make them have the one thing they feel that they need, the one thing they desperately want. And there's this sort of, unfortunate exchange that he makes. This sort of, what he wants back isn't payment, it's chaos. And I just think it's such a brilliant plot, and it's just a really well realised, interesting villain. Leyland Gaunt, the proprietor of Needful Things. So, this is another bunch of books. So this is a bunch of books that I've already said I'm going to reread. And this is another hark back to my teenage years. These books meant a hell of a lot to me. And I wanted to include them, even though I do desperately want to reread them. I want to reevaluate them. I want to find out if I love them as much as I used to. But I really did love these books. And they're written by Fritz Lieber, as you can see here. They're the Pfafford and Grey Mouser books. So you got Swords and Deviltry. Hold on, I'll go through them quick. Swords and Deviltry. I don't know if they're in order. No, they're not in order. Swords and Ice Magic. Swords in the Mist. Swords Against Wizardry. Swords of Lankmar, which is where they're from, which all their stories are set. Swords Against Death. They're literally against the Grim Reaper. And the Knight and Knave of Swords there. And there is the guy that I'm picking for this one, the Grey Mouser. So that's Pfafford, who's a barbarian, and the Grey Mouser. And they're both thieves, but he's kind of like, for me, he's like the kind of thief I really love. And that sort of nimble, I don't know, that kind of... I don't know, something really cool about him. It's really difficult to put into words, really, isn't it, when you just connect to a character or you really like them. But it's that sort of... to be honest, it's kind of what I like doing in D&D when I play D&D. I like doing this kind of thief character. So if any of my D&D friends are watching this, I've got Grey Mouser in my head when I'm doing my character, my rogue character. But anyway, yeah, that sort of thing. I need to reread these to give you a little bit more detail about why I love them. But what I am going to do is reread these and do videos on them. So I will put more substance to what I'm saying here. But have you read those Swords books? And do you like the Grey Mouser character? Okay, so my next one is a really interesting character. This is now going into my more recent reads, if you like. I read this about 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And I still haven't read the others. But Leviathan Wakes is the first book of The Expanse. There's loads of books in this series. I can't remember how many, because I've got the first 4, but I've only read this first one so far. But the character arc for the character Detective Joe Miller is fantastic, and I just think he's at the heart of what's great about this novel. And I loved this book. I really enjoyed it a lot, and I couldn't put it down. I was. It was one of those times. There's been a few times recently when I've talked about it as well, but certainly this is true for these books, that it's that thing where it's physically, you can physically feel the desire to pick it up again, and you can't because life gets in the way, and it's like, I want to read the next bit of the book. And Joe Miller is such an interesting character. So he's a bit of a lone wolf, a bit of a lone voice. There's sort of resentment for this character that is trying to police the belt, which is the asteroid belt, in a world where Earth has colonized the solar system, especially Mars and the Moon and an asteroid belt. That's kind of like where the main settings are for this book. And basically, Detective Joe Miller works on the asteroid belt, and he deals with lots of kind of resentment against him and prejudice against him. But he's working towards trying to find this girl that's kind of at the heart of this mystery. That's basically the heart of the mystery of the book. And there's like a cultural war on the belt that he's kind of like in the middle of as well. He's seen as a traitor for trying to police the belt, and he's got this sort of classic hard-nosed detective kind of cynical feel. And what's really cool is you've got this very idiosyncratic character that's in the middle of a political mess on the asteroid belt in this book, and he's got this cynicism about him through the whole thing, but then it becomes heroism by the end of the book. And it's just a really cool journey, but it's also just his scenes. This book goes between two different stories and two different POVs, and his bits were easily the best, and I just loved it when he was in the story. So Detective Joe Miller in The Expanse, Leviathan Wakes, is awesome. So here's another choice. This is really special. This is a contender for my all-time favourite book, so it's not necessarily going to be the case that I'm bound to choose that for the character, but I am going to, because I think this is all about character, and that's Flowers for Algernon. So I have done a video on Flowers for Algernon. Please watch it, because I'd love to know what you think of the video. But I do love this book. And Charlie, who's the main character, he's the one that goes through these scientific experiments to improve his intelligence, goes through such a fascinating, compelling, brilliantly written journey where he's quite he's of a low level of understanding and a low vocabulary, low intelligence at the beginning of the story, and then through the story that changes through these experiments. I won't tell you what happens, but I will tell you, sometimes you can have these reactions in a book that, this physical reaction, and people talk about a book that makes them cry, or a book that makes them laugh, or whatever, those kind of things. I don't normally cry in books, but this, I'll never forget that there was this moment in this book. It's just about about 3/4 way through, maybe, probably a bit more than that. But there's a moment when something happens, which I'm not going to spoil it, and I genuinely felt my heart stop. It was like my heart skipped a beat. It was like, I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. And I'll never forget that feeling, because it really did. I was so moved by what had happened and what it meant for Charlie, and what it meant for the experiments, what it meant for everyone around him that was reacting to what was happening to Charlie, and then what was now happening to Charlie. And I'll never forget that feeling when I was reading it, and just these words on the page, it immersed me so much. And my investment in Charlie, and this one line happens, and I was like, oh my God. So yeah, just incredible book. This is one that I read about 5 years ago, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago, I'm not sure. And again, this is, I've accidentally, I didn't do this deliberately, but I've accidentally gone to quite a different types of books here. And Alice Walker's The Colour Purple, and I love this cover, by the way. I've seen lots of other covers of this, but I'm so glad I've got this one. I love this cover. But this book was a really, really profound experience reading this. I really loved it. I felt really moved by it. I loved all of the characters in it. Celie especially, I think, has got this... she's got this charisma that is partly maybe because of all the things she goes through. But you're constantly willing her on. You want her to have a good life and get through all this stuff that she has to deal with. I couldn't recommend this book more than it's impossible to over recommend this book. That was badly said, but you know what I mean. And Celie is at the heart of this. It's all about her story, and it's all about her as her story matures and she grows to understand things more. She ages a fair bit in the book, and all of these things that are kind of like her trials through this horrible life that she leads to as she gets older, her understanding of the way that her life has developed and other people around her really develops in such a sophisticated way. It's so cleverly written. And it's all very personally written as well. So it's the POV thing is all about Celie as well, and because it's all letters and it's just a beautiful book. And Celie as a character, I think, is it's just so easily one of the greatest characters ever written. So yeah, for me, really made a huge impact on me. The Colour Purple. Okay, I'm going to talk about Becky Chambers now, because she's fantastic at writing characters, and I've read 5 of her books. I'm in the middle of reading this one as well, which hasn't really got going for me yet. Something for the Wild Bill, but it has got going though. So I'm kind of halfway through, and I can see it picking up. So I'm sure I'm going to love it, but it wasn't quite there yet. This book absolutely gripped me straight away. This is the second book of the Wayfarer series, Closed in Common Orbit. It's my favourite Becky Chambers book, but it's not necessarily everyone else's favourite Becky Chambers book. And some people actually said they think it's a weaker one in the series, which I don't know. I love it. And for me, as far as this video goes, I'm picking on Pepper, who is one of the 2 main characters in this. So this book is almost entirely about 2 characters. So there's Lovelace, who is the AI computer system that has to go on this quite important journey about her identity through the book, and Pepper, who's the engineer that's looking after Lovelace, and basically you go through her journey. And Pepper started off as a child in captivity, pretty much a slave, called Jane 23. So she was genetically engineered, and if you look through the book, you can see that the chapters are going between these 2 characters, and also you can see different ages of Jane when she was a little kid, and then as she grows older, and it just adds more and more meat to the bones of her story as it goes along. And it's just brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Again, another book I couldn't put down. Another book I really got immersed in the characterization, and the friendship and the connection between 2 characters is really important. And Pepper, who is also obviously through most of the book called Jane 23, is a fantastically written character. So if you haven't read any Becky Chambers, you could go with that, because you don't have to read all of them in the same order. But this is the second of the Wayfarer's books, the Wayfarer series. So that's her. And then I've got a couple more here. I had them in 2 piles, so I should be 10 by the time I get through these 2 as well, and I'll do the honourable mentions. So Cosby'S Razor Blade Tears. I know I've talked about this a number of times. Just as a side note, it was so nice to see that Brian from Bookish had just read this on my recommendation and really liked it. So it's great. I loved what he said about it. So if you're watching this, Brian, That was really lovely to see. It's beautifully written, and Buddy Lee is the character that I was probably more moved by. He's both the characters, both the main characters in this, Buddy Lee and Ike, are both characters that have a real journey to make in the book, and they start off politically somewhere and they end up politically somewhere else. Also, they're grieving for the whole thing. Their relationship to each other changes through the whole thing, and their relationship with their families change through the whole thing as well. And then the way that they're grieving affects how they feel about their sons change as well, because it's all about them seeking revenge for the death of their sons, Ike and Buddy Lee. But Buddy Lee in particular has got quite a lot, because the stuff about the stuff about poverty and class, it hangs on Buddy Lee's story, and also he's got low self-esteem. He doesn't feel like he's got a lot of regrets, and just the way that Buddy Lee is written is so fantastic. So yeah, that's what I'm choosing here for that character, and obviously you might find it inevitable that I chose that, but it's such a nice example of great crime writing. You know, I haven't read a ton of crime books, but it definitely makes me want to read more when you read something by S.A. Cosby. And then the inspiration for this video, the reason why I want to do this video, is Charles Portis's True Grit. And Mattie, as a character, is just phenomenal. She's such an interesting character. So there she is in the cover, and Rooster Cogburn's the kind of character that she seeks out to, again, find revenge on the killing of her father, that happens off screen before the whole thing starts, and she wants to basically get justice for her dad. She knows who killed him and wants to find him. And as a character, she's such an interesting a girl that's older than her years. She's very mature, but she's also got an innocence to her as well. It's a really subtle, very mix of lots of different things, but you feel like she will put herself in danger because she's so forthright and forceful, but she'll also probably go way out of her, go over her head. I think that's probably the right phrase. I'm not sure, but she'll put herself in a position that she shouldn't be putting herself in because of her personality, and all of that is in the book. It's so brilliantly written. She's a really interesting character. So Mattie from True Grit is my last choice of these 10 characters I think are awesome. So as a side thing, 2 characters that I could have mentioned but I've not mentioned for particular reasons. So 3 actually, just looking at it. So I didn't really want to do too much on Alice, because I do love the fact that again, she will argue in the book if she thinks that what's happening to her doesn't make sense or is inconsistent or annoying. She'll say it, which is great, because it's a completely mad, nonsensical book, obviously. But I think the reason why I haven't included her in the main bit is that I probably love the book and the stuff that's around the character more than the character itself. So I do think that's a thing. But I wanted to mention it because Alice is such an interesting character within herself. And then this is the 3rd book of the Dresden Files, and this is where I am. So I've only read 2 books, but I have a feeling that the more I read, the more I'm going to get into Harry Dresden's personality and his attitude, and I do feel like he's very likable as a character. So I think I'm going to like him the more I read, but I've only read 2, so I don't want to include it yet. But I do like him as a character. It's weird though, because it's so long ago I read the other 2 that I don't know, I might need to read the other 2 again. I'm not sure. And then one last thing, really quickly, and that's the Belgariad. Is the strength of this is the writing of the characters really in their relationships, because it is a Lord of the Rings ripoff, but it's the characterization really that sells it. And I remember, I need to read these again, but I remember really loving the character Silk. So that's a kind of another honourable mention. I say an honourable mention because I need to read it again, but I remember loving the character Silk, who again was a bit of a thief. Clearly I've got to think about that. So there we are. Bit of a long one, 10 characters. Did you connect to any of those characters? What would you choose as your 10 favourite characters? Let me know. Thanks for watching. Bye.